In the early 1980s, European tourists flocked to the Aros vacation resort on the Red Sea. They came for the idyllic turquoise waters, the vibrant coral reefs, and the fresh seafood. What those guests had no idea of was that the friendly diving instructors handing out scuba gear and mixing drinks were actually undercover Mossad agents. Mossad utilized the resort as a clandestine extraction point for Ethiopian Jews, a community harboring a centuries-old religious longing to return to Jerusalem. To get there, thousands of these Ethiopian refugees had survived a punishing trek on foot, only to find themselves trapped in the deserts of Sudan. They were starving, suffering from tropical diseases, and stranded inside a hostile Arab League nation that strictly forbade any ties with Israel. Traditional diplomatic channels were now completely closed. Because physical distance was superseded by immovable political borders, the only way out was an entirely off-the-grid extraction. That geographic necessity birthed Operation Moses. The Aros resort served as the perfect coastal front. Under the cover of darkness, agents would load refugees onto small dinghies and smuggle them out to Israeli naval vessels waiting offshore. As the crisis deepened, the sea route alone couldn't move people fast enough. The operation expanded to the skies, enlisting a Belgian charter company called Trans-European Airways to run covert midnight airlifts out of the Sudanese capital, Khartoum. To avoid arousing suspicion, the airline disguised these 40 extractions as routine charter flights. The planes would divert far to the north, creating a geographical loophole. They landed in Brussels for a brief layover, refueled with the passengers hidden inside, and finally pivoted toward Tel Aviv. The operation worked. 10,000 Ethiopian refugees survived the covert journey, stepping off planes in Israel to fulfill what they saw as their mythological return. While the extractions succeeded in bringing thousands home, the logistics of the journey were only the beginning. Once on the ground, the community faced a severe, fracturing identity crisis. The euphoria of reaching the promised land faded quickly. As the Ethiopian community settled into modern Israel, they collided with a massive cultural barrier. Ethnographic studies document exactly how this divide played out, analyzing the internal structures the community used to define themselves. The elders who led the exodus relied heavily on ancient Ethiopian frameworks, enforcing strict purity laws, isolated foodways, and complex kinship systems. These rigid, ancient boundaries clashed completely with the fast-paced, highly secular reality of late 20th century Israeli society. The state operated on modern schedules, mixed-gender environments, and entirely different social norms. By achieving the geographic sanctuary they had prayed for, the older generation inadvertently locked themselves into profound cultural isolation. Historically, Israel absorbed immigrants through powerful state institutions. The military, the education system, and the economy were designed to strip away previous nationalities and forge a single, unified Israeli identity. The Ethiopian immigrants entered this exact same pipeline. Yet, despite the massive covert resources the state spent to extract them, they found themselves pushed to the margins of daily life, facing pervasive racism and systemic exclusion. This systemic alienation reached an explosive climax in 1996, during the Blood Affair, when protests erupted over the revelation that the National Blood Bank had secretly discarded donations from Ethiopian Israelis. It exposed a glaring paradox at the heart of the state. The government had risked its top intelligence agents to save a population that its own society struggled to accept as equals. The traditional assimilation model had failed them. For the younger generation of Ethiopian Israelis, simply becoming Israeli the old-fashioned way was impossible. They had to invent their own path to belong. Instead of looking inward to the traditions of their elders, or fighting to force their way into the mainstream Israeli establishment, Ethiopian youth looked outward. They began adopting symbols from the global Black diaspora. Teenagers embraced hip-hop aesthetics, Rastafarian styles, and an international urban culture. Academic researchers found that this embrace of global subculture served as a complex psychological tool for integration. By aligning themselves with a massive, globally respected cultural movement, these teenagers gained immense social leverage. They stopped fighting a losing battle against local prejudice and bypassed it entirely, tapping into a broader identity that commanded respect. For marginalized populations, true integration often requires abandoning the strict binary of us versus them. They used a third, global identity as a cultural bridge to navigate their local reality. This hybrid approach led to the most surprising evolution of the Ethiopian migration. The long-awaited return to Israel was not a permanent final destination. Over the last few decades, a modern traveling culture has emerged. Ethiopian Israelis now frequently travel back to visit the very country they fled. These reverse trips serve highly functional purposes. Immigrants return to Addis Ababa to establish underground economic networks, consult with local traditional healers, and simply reconnect with the cultural nostalgia of their youth. This shift replaces the linear arrow of traditional assimilation with a cyclical, looping network of exchange. Operation Moses physically relocated an ancient tribe, but its legacy reveals a new reality. In a globalized world, identity is no longer tied to a final destination, but exists in the continuous, hybrid journey between worlds.